Do you remember Call of Duty Zombies? No, not the new ones. They're stinky. But the classics, back in the day type zombies. The type of zombies game where you were so young that your brother would hand you the controller and say, oh, you're playing too. You just can't see your character. I'll never forgive you for that. I have a very specific memory of playing zombies for the first time on 5 on Black Ops 1 and being told, oh yeah, you get points when you go down, and fully believing it.
Zombies.
So I just kept purposely going down. Meanwhile, I was playing the multiplayer mode, so my teammates are probably so angry at me. Little did they know I was like fucking 8 years old. Yeah, I used to be a Call of Duty squeaker, what about it? In this video, I want to discuss the horror elements and the sort of aesthetics that have been lost from World at War onwards. It's going to be very loose and ranty, but I hope you enjoy. I'm not someone who's really engaged much with the more recent entries other than, say, Black Ops 4, and I played a little bit of Modern Warfare when that came out. In this video, I want to highlight sort of the loss of style, and then also the gameplay itself becoming a bit too complex will also be a small focus, but as I said, I'm not really someone who has much experience there. My main point of focus is going to be how scary World at War Zombies is. Now, originally you could only unlock the zombies mode by completing the campaign. There was a huge sense of confusion that came with that. I remember the fear that struck into me after seeing that zombie charge at you, then loading into Nakda and Toten. I remember I just paused the game because I was so scared to even continue. The ambience alone creeped me out, and then I remember hearing the first zombie scream in the distance, and it just absolutely terrified me. One of the reasons why World at War still feels so scary to replay is the fact that the weapons you have just feel so weak. On a map like Nakda and Toten, where there's only a mystery box to supply you with your arms, no pack-a-punch or perks, it truly feels like a David and Goliath-esque situation where you're just like left with these inadequate tools to try and defeat these fucking creatures that just keep on coming. And in my opinion, each map really had its own sense of style. Maybe this is down to the fact that it was so early on in the series that they still had to sort of develop the actual core gameplay elements of the series. But each map to me sort of had its own style. Nakda and Toten, for example, is very grey, moody, and foggy, compared to something like Shinonuma with its greens and haziness. And then Verrückt with how warm and saturated and bloody it all is. It's just so aggressively violent and horror-esque. And then Der Riese is sort of like the weird, scientific, creepy, lore-filled map to me. It has sort of a balance of all of it. There's fog, there's greys, there's blues, there's warm, saturated fire. And I think the way these games have aged really also plays into the horror aesthetic. Because of the graphics themselves being so primitive compared to the modern day standards, there's definitely a level of subtlety that's lost. But there is nothing more nostalgic to me than like the early 2010s ultra grit, realistic style, especially in Call of Duty. I don't know why the sharpness and contrast was so high, but it's so cool looking, it's so scary. There's also just a pre-existing level of horror that already exists from World at War. I mean, the main intro theme is absolutely terrifying. And it's still probably one of the most gritty depictions of war in a Call of Duty game, even despite the modern attempts being so in your face with it. Maybe I've spent too much time away from this series to really have an opinion on it, but when I see clips of like the Warzone gameplay on my Twitter feed, I just think, man, I must be too old because I don't understand this new kid strats. It's just so scary. Call of Duty Ghosts is overhated. And it's not even like I'm begging for this original style of arcade zombies gameplay to come back. But when you look at, say, the Modern Warfare 3 zombies being this weird open world gameplay experience of like mini bosses and things, it's just not what you come to expect when you think Call of Duty Zombies. Like, it's just so baffling to me. And it definitely is quite ironic, considering how popular like Black Ops 3 Chronicles is. Because that's essentially just the original maps remastered with the gameplay of Black Ops 3, which is probably still the definite way to experience zombies now. Obviously, more dedicated fans to the series will be able to express their thoughts and opinions on the gameplay mechanics changing. But it's also important to note the style and how gritty and creepy World at War and Black Ops 1 were especially. There was just something quite scary about World at War Zombies even now. Just the atmosphere and the ambience and the sounds and the general environment is just so off-putting. When you fly around in no-clip on the PC version, you just get this sense of dread floating through these areas which are usually full of sound and noise and like distorted fighting. when you're screaming trying to fucking train zombies through halls on a 4-player co-op map, you know, clicking of electronics and sparks and sort of groaning in the distance. It's all so cool. There's also like a major sense of hopelessness with the classic World at War maps that you don't really get. And there's a huge loss of the sort of horror-focused style they had originally. Like on Nectar and Toad, there's no crazy complex scheme to win or beat the map. You're just forced to start and end. There's no goal other than trying to reach the highest round. The lack of story made it really mysterious and actually fun to engage with and sort of theorize. Like I remember watching YouTube videos on like NoClip exploring the World at War map and seeing like the crashed plane from the cutscene and stuff and being like, oh my god, did these guys crash and they had to survive? It was just so engaging to me. I think there's also something to be said about how you engage with the story. In Derice, for example, you have these radios that you have to find on the map and knife, which give you sort of subtle hints to what happened in that location, which once you learn about adds to the really creepy and unsettling aesthetic that already exists there. And with Verrückt, kind of is so in your face with its horror elements. The bloody handprints everywhere and the fact you're literally in an asylum being raided by zombies. And it also being one of the hardest maps too. There's definitely sort of a cult history of that. Nakta and Toten as well, sort of the more bare bones example, the fact there's no voice lines, no parks, no context, I suppose, other than the intro scene. So the only thing you really have to build on is the environment and the zombies themselves, and that sort of captures a very off-putting vibe. I think there's something really special about the era that Call of Duty Zombies came to relevance in. There's something so engaging about how like purposely gritty it all is, and like the whole aspect of it being like crazy scientists and kind of the lack of all the mystical stuff that came later on in the series. I think it just stands on its own as being quite unique. Like I think it's a part of just modern gaming and how sort of the drive towards wanting realistic graphics kind of removes the stylization, especially when you look at video game UIs. I think game series like Call of Duty really are a best example of how live service is kind of destroying a lot of identity. If you compare what we have now with like Modern Warfare 3 and Warzone and whatever, the UIs of that style of that compared to like the original Modern Warfare series or say World at War, there's really a huge lack of identity. I mean, the whole part of this new generation of Call of Duty games is the fact they're all linked and able to be cross-played or whatever within that Warzone game mode. And sure, I think nostalgia could play a part in the reason why I think World at War Zombies is so special. But I think a lot of people would agree that the Zombies sort of game mode has definitely lost its identity in recent years. Where there is just something so charming about how the guns sound like hitting stones on a wall, and the way the game is so cold and grey but then has these really contrasting warm flames and like these electric blues, and everything is so identifiable. Whereas the further you go down into the series, like fucking that first map in Black Ops 3, everything is so muddy and there's so many effects going on, it's just like, it doesn't really feel like the same series. And I think the loss of style can kind of be tracked and identified from the development in gameplay and sort of the change in what consumers want coming from a Call of Duty series. I think Treyarch and the other developers really tried to focus on Easter eggs and puzzles, as well as how the story developed to be so convoluted and honestly some of the most confusing backstory and lore to a game ever. I mean, the majority of videos that cover the lore of Call of Duty Zombies is like 8 to 10 hours long, probably even longer than that, because I'm so out of the loop of it. I just haven't even bothered to keep up with it really. So talking on the nostalgia factor again, I think it definitely plays into the reason why I do like and prefer the older Zombies games. I mean, you know, it's kind of impossible to recreate the feeling of watching your older brother play World at War Zombies and you not being allowed to play split screen with him, you know. You can't really recreate that when you're almost 20 years old. But again, there is something so charming about the early Zombies storyline in like the original 4 core members of the group and how it sort of progressed onwards, and it really felt like a easy to follow story and narrative from World at War to Black Ops, and even into Black Ops 2 in some stages. I mean, obviously there's maps and storylines that continue on from the original group, but it really started to get a bit chaotic and the gameplay even started to change a bit too much. Even if Black Ops 2 does have probably the core memories for me when it comes to the Call of Duty Zombies series. But there's just such a clear and identifiable character that comes with first sort of stages in the series. I mean, back when only Treyarch was developing the zombies games, they had such a unique sense of being. They added so much character to the Black Ops games too. And maybe it's the fact that I've just spent so many hours over the years playing and coming back to World at War and Black Ops 2 that makes me love the gameplay and the gameplay loop itself more than, say, Black Ops 3 or fucking, I don't know, Cold War Zombies. You know, who's out here playing fucking Call of Duty Vanguard? Who's playing the zombies and that? Like, come on. There is something so satisfying about saving up to open the first door, getting your first perk like Juggernog or something, getting the pack-a-punches open and repeating that sort of, you know, in Darius example, for example, fucking when you had to do all the teleporters and then bang, you get the pack-a-punch and then boom, you're locked in and you just have to survive for as long as you can. Sure, it might not be as engaging as being able to engage in some sort of like challenge to unlock the power or to unlock a cool gun, but that arcade style is really what brought me into the zombies series, and it's definitely been lost with time. To round off this video, before I sort of summarise my points, I've invited my friend Jonny to speak about his opinions on the maps and aesthetics from the early entries in Treyarch Zombies. I asked him to speak on Black Ops 3 mainly because I don't really have much experience, and I'm honestly quite put off by the complexity of just unlocking Pack-a-Punch on some of them, or even just getting the fucking power on, man. It's too much for me. I also thought it would be nice to include him because he happens to run an Aphex Twin Instagram account, and there's quite a big player in the Aphex Twin community. Aphex Twin is a music artist who I use a lot of music from in my videos, so I feel like it kind of ties it all in nicely. So yeah, I'll leave some links to that below. And honestly, to speak on something with not much experience feels kind of ignorant of me. I know it's only a video game and I'm making this video all in fun, but it's also just important to include other voices. And if those other voices can offer differing opinions and contrasting thoughts, I feel like I may as well try and reach out and get them for something like this. Anyways, onto Jonny's segment.
You smell that? It smells like Call of Duty Zombies. Man, I love Call of Duty Zombies. It's possibly one of the most phenomenal game mode experiences I've ever had. Zombies, when it's usually associated with the Treyarch, is known for being very scary, rather frightening, especially during its inception back in 2008 for World at War, like with the maps of Shino Numa and Verrückt being the rectangular loop of death. The map is so claustrophobic and has so many blind corners where you can't even see zombies come from, especially on the stair loops. Those stairs have caused me to die so many times. The only added whimsy to this map is the introduction of, you know, the perks, the speed colas, the double taps, the juggernauts, and the quick revive. My favourite thing about this map and the true grasp of survival it brings is when you spawn in with 3 other people and you immediately get blocked off by this set of double doors and you have to turn on the power to open it. For those 5 or 6 rounds and you've got an inexperienced player on your side, that shit is tense as fuck. First time I played this map was on Black Ops 1 in the Resurrection pack, and I was like 11 or 12, and I was so scared of the right side because visually it was darker and it had that kitchen room with all the viscera and offal on its like countertop. So I was like, nah, that shit's scary as fuck. So every time when I was playing that map, I always wanted to spawn on the left side because left side was way more bright. It had that balcony corridor way and the toilet room, which was just considerably way more brighter. So I kept on leaving and rejoining sessions on the multiplayer, and I must have pissed off so many motherfucking people back then. I'd say a modern equivalent of this map definitely has to be Gorod Krovi. It's got so many twisting, contorting hallways and walkways. It is very claustrophobic in areas. There are a lack of training spots as well, and it just offers an incredible challenge. I just don't like that bomb step in the fucking trophy challenge. Fuck that shit, man. That shit's giving me nightmares. I feel like how they utilise fear in the more modern zombies games is how they overwhelm you with tasks, you know what I mean? They overwhelm you with steps which you have to unlock Pack-a-Punch for, you have to build a shield, you have to fucking do the Easter egg step. There's a lot of fetching to do whilst also being bombarded by a load of zombies and specialist zombies. I mean, it is ingenuity at its finest, but it's sometimes unneeded. Very bloody annoying as well. Especially on maps like fucking Revelations. Holy shit. Let me talk about Shinonuma for a second, because that map literally goes against you in areas and utilises the fear of the unknown very well. The zombies literally unearth themselves, and their spawn rates are so spontaneous they can spawn right behind you. And what definitely doesn't help is the thick, oozing mud of the swamp. If you find yourself in that, that could be the catalyst of your demise. The hellhounds are as equally terrifying because, you know, they accentuate the fog and they can literally come out of nowhere. You gotta be peeking over your shoulders, bro. Another thing that this map gives off is a gross humidity, a sheer warmth that is just so uncomfortable to experience. It's the same warmth you get from a fucking greenhouse. It is that nasty, and that's why I love it, man. I feel like with the more modern inputs of zombies, they kind of veered away from the original horror aspect they were going for. I moved on to a more surreal, Lovecraftian, macabre type deal. You know what I mean? Like, they introduced malevolent, unearthly deities like the Apothegon Servant, the Shadow Man, the Keepers, like whimsical and mystical weapons which do like godlike damage, like the Ice Staff, the Wind Staff, the bows on Der Eisendrache. I mean, it's dope as fuck, and those were sick bars. But but those weapons kind of took away the aesthetic of survival for me. I didn't even know what's going on half the time in Black Ops 4 Zombies because the storyline is so misconstrued, and some of these steps to these Easter eggs are so bloody hard. I can't even wrap my head around some of these maps. Voyage of Despair, Ancient Evil, fucking Blood of the Dead they ruined, the classic Mob of the Dead. I can't believe they did that. Fucking hell. I think the last map that absorbed this horror aspect was the map Zetsubo no Shima on Black Ops 3. This map is a total freak of nature. Everything's been mutated by 115, so the flora and fauna are completely hostile against you, and the whole sort of vegetation has taken over the whole map. Murky greens and browns cover this entire map like it's a duvet, and the only bright colours that really shine out are the oranges from the spores and the buckets of coloured water you can get to create monstrous plants to help you out. The map is just so hectic and narrow, it never gives you any space to breathe, and it's so underrated, and it just captures a horrifying atmosphere. Last two maps I have to focus definitely have to be the best map ever made, Shadows of Evil, in my opinion. Honestly, there are so many bustling, bright vermilions and reds that coat the entire map, and I love the oranges and the style of it being like in Chicago or some shit, and Revelations. Although it is a great bit of nostalgia bait, it's just the whole colour scheme with it being so blue and purpley. It is partially kaleidoscopic when you've got that fucking flying Apothegon Servant just chilling around with Pack-a-Punch in his belly, bro. Oh god. I do think Black Ops 3 has the best zombies out of all of the Call of Duties because it has the best game engine to go off of, and obviously has the best fan service for introducing Zombie Chronicles. You know, if you're playing like World at War, Black Ops 1, and you jump straight to Black Ops 3 and you're like, oh my goodness, Shadows of Evil, fucking Zetsubo no Shima, this is convoluted as fuck, then obviously there's Zombie Chronicles to rely on. And it's all the classic maps, all done in HD clarity. Anyway, that's me done rambling for tonight. There you go. Cheers. Subscribe to Slopmog for money.
To summarise my thoughts, I definitely think there's a lost style that doesn't really exist now. That's quite obvious, especially when you look at like the mod entries into the series. There's just such a lack of style and identity now that makes the Call of Duty series just really feel like nothing. At the end of the day, we go zombies to the one guy working on Call of Duty. He decided to whip up this mode in his free time. The origins are really interesting, and I recommend going and looking into them, but essentially some guy passed around a demo of the zombies mode, and it got really popular, so they were allowed to make it into an official game mode once it reached like one of the offices or something. Kind of ironic now how exploited the series has been, and how much it's evolved from the original entry. It kind of reminds me of how the original meaning of the word zombie has been translated into this new westernized idea of it, and how it doesn't even really represent what it originally was intended to represent. I think there's definitely a larger conversation to be had. Is it morally okay to use the imagery of Nazis? They're undead and you get to mow them down. Is it okay to use those aesthetics for your game, for horror elements? And it's definitely not on the nose there. Maybe I'm not the person to speak about that. But there are other subtle elements to this game and series that are really interesting to me, like especially the environments in World at War, The music, the ambience, the characters, the guns, the way the guns sound, it's also unique and identifiable compared to any other shooter game. I'm hoping to produce more structured videos, so if you enjoyed, please subscribe. I'd appreciate any feedback on what I can improve on. I understand that this was a bit more freeform, but I'm hoping in the edit kind of makes more sense. I'm just sort of rambling and looking at photos of World at War right now, so that probably gives you an idea of why I sound so mumbo jumbo. If you made it this far anyway, shout out. Be real. Does anyone remember Merc music? Yeah, me neither.